The wilderness back in 2007 was the Runescape stomping grounds. Everyone was hopping that ditch, fighting each other just for the fun of it. These days, it's quite a bit less populated than it was for various reasons. A changing player base, lack of or surplus of updates, and focus placed in the wrong areas are all to blame. The wilderness has been notoriously difficult for the Jagex team to improve. Let's look at why. Keep in mind, I'm not a pker, so this is purely from the perspective of a pvmer/pet hunter. First, let's talk about all of the qualities that are intrinsic to the wilderness. It is the only place in the entire game where you can attack other players and take their items. That means, by default, it is the most dangerous area in the game. It is visually striking from the rest of the game as well, being a dark, barren wasteland. It was designed to get more dangerous the deeper you went as well, with a higher level range of players that can attack you and preventing teleports past level 20 wilderness, besides some unique teleports that work up to level 30. There are also various splits in the wilderness with multi-combat and single combat areas. In multi, multiple people can attack a single target, where in singles it's limited to one-on-one fights. There are various unique pieces of content the old school team added to the wilderness, many wilderness bosses, the Chaos Altar, and Black Chinchompa skilling methods, and Revenants. With gravestones now in the game, the wilderness is really the only location in the game that still has a risk mechanic. The wilderness is all about risk versus reward. That reward truly should always be gold or saving gold. The goal with the wilderness should be encouraging risking your items for the opportunity to make more money from interacting with it. The Chaos Altar is an example of great skilling content for the wilderness. A 50% chance to save a bone while prayer training there makes far more sense than just pure double XP, which is actually what it was originally going to be. It does not actually give better XP an hour than the Gilded Altar, but is far cheaper to train there than at Gilded Altar, at the cost of being able to be attacked. Black Chinchompas, on the other hand, I feel were a mistake. Having the best hunter XP possible be in the wilderness encourages players to enter the wilderness who do not bring risk to interact with the content. You could bring expensive Auntie Pecan gear or tank gear to stay for a long time, or you could just leave whenever you get up to 30 Chinchompas, which is what all of the bots do, which is frustrating for everyone involved. If I were adding Black Chins to the wilderness now, they would exist outside the wilderness as well, but give a chance of multiple Chinchompa catches within the wilderness with no added XP for the double catch. Much more in line with the Chaos Altar. Extra resource gain, but without technically being better at XP. Let's talk about wilderness bosses, especially with the wilderness boss rework on the horizon. These bosses have some major problems. The primary way you kill these is with awkward safe spots in which you completely negate the boss's mechanics entirely, making the only real concern at these pkers. For Venonatus, the main safe spot has you drag her one tile into multi, and then move to the east a few tiles so you can be standing in singles. Most people like Venonatus the best, as it is the lowest wilderness level of any of the bosses in singles, so it is incredibly easy to escape pkers. Callisto has a more complicated lure where you pull him south a ways to singles and attack him with a chain mace, completely AFK. It's really important to note that these two bosses have the highest defense levels of any boss in the game at 490 and 440 respectively. The Inferno Jads have 480 defense, which is the only boss to come even remotely close to this defense level. The last main wildy boss is Vedion, which most agree is the most annoying of the three to kill. He has an annoying lure where you need to maintain a 3-hit attack cycle with awkward walk pattern to avoid being hit. He has 2 gimmicks. At half HP, he summons 2 skeletal hellhounds, which make him invulnerable until killed. And once Vedion's HP is depleted, he revives to full HP, turning orange, literally repeating the fight for a second time until he is truly defeated. The Vedion safe spots are all located in multi. The main safe spawn is a few steps from level 30 wilderness, meaning you cannot immediately teleport. Finally, there are the other 2 lesser bosses as well. There is the Chaos Elemental, which, to be fair, is an actual fight, albeit very chaotic and low random. It uses random attacks with random styles, can teleport you, and can remove your items. It is located just above level 50 wilderness in multi. Just north of Chaos Elemental, in a cave, there is also Scorpio. She's very weak to magic and only attacks with melee, meaning to prevent getting attacked, players simply freeze her in place. At half HP, Scorpio summons 2 healing scorpions. These can either be killed, frozen and lured away, or Scorpio can simply be bursted straight through with multiple people. There's also Kbd, but he is not actually in the wilderness, simply requiring you to trek through the wilderness to get to his lair. The main incentive for killing any of these bosses is their pet drops. For Scorpio and Chaos Elemental, their pet drops are the only incentive, which I truly despise, but we will get to that. The other big 3 wildy bosses are all over 3 mil GP an hour, so they do have some monetary incentive as well, although it's not a ton. Because we usually ignore the mechanics of these bosses with safe spots, pkers are the only real risk at these bosses. Your options as a pvmer at these bosses when you get attacked are either A, anti-PK the aggressor, or B, escape. Anti-Pecan requires you bring additional risk in weapons to kill the PKer on you, as well as being at a disadvantage due to needing unique supplies and equipment for the bosses. The only boss that has overlap with PvP weaponry is Scorpio, where you can bring Harm Staff if doloing or duoing, which is also great for killing PKers. For the other bosses, you'll be using either a crossbow or chain mace, both of which are terrible PvP weapons. Anti-Pecan really only works in singles, as in multi you are just never going to kill off a clan of people attacking you. So Vedion is crossed off that list pretty much completely. What about escaping? Teleporting is a viable strategy if you don't get teleblocked. At Venonatus, you can simply teleport at any given moment, and at Callisto or Vedion, you theoretically can tank to level 30 wilderness if you don't get teleblocked. At Vedion, it's nearly guaranteed you'll be blocked as it's in multi. What are your escape options if you get teleblocked? Well, before it used to be tank to something to X-log on, which is closing your client while retaliating against a monster in singles. But this was patched out of the game months ago. You could always freeze your target if you're in singles. This requires you to be on Ancients though, and if you recall, I mentioned Venonatus and Callisto have the highest defense of any boss in the game, meaning you really need thralls. They make up from 10 to 20% of your DPS at these bosses. Your other option is a ZGS, a melee special attack that uses 50% of your spec meter to freeze your target in place for 20 seconds if the attack lands. If it lands, great, you've escaped. Just stand under your target and log out. If it doesn't land, good luck tanking to the ditch or a ladder. Also, if they freeze you after you land it before you get under them, that's also GG. At Scorpio, Chaos Elemental, and Vedion, if you get teleblocked, it's pretty much a guaranteed death, as clans with 5+ people love to PK at these locations. These bosses having pets attached to them is what is truly aggravating. As a PVMer who literally only cares about these bosses' pet drops, I'd rather just do whatever gives me the most kills per hour. Anti-PKing wastes a lot of time that could be spent killing the boss. So, I'd rather bring a bit less risk and simply escape whenever a PKer gets on me and quickly gear up to go back, which is pretty boring. My other option is to pay boosters to just finish the pet grind ASAP, which is probably more boring. If these simply had good GP incentives rather than pets attached, bringing things to anti-PK suddenly makes a lot more sense. They really can't remove the pets at this point, so here we are. Maraiza went over the team's goals with the Wildy Boss rework.
Big one here, I know that the multi people will rejoice, non-multis maybe not so, but the dungeons or areas that the bosses will be in are very likely going to be in multi. And with that, we will be designing the areas to have a stronger focus on the PK ecosystem.
They seem set on putting the bosses into caves similar to Scorpio with no safe spots, and giving them at least somewhat mechanically interesting fights aimed at mid-level or higher stats. He also said that these caves would likely be in multi. Honestly, if they do this, I think Wildy bosses will just be dead and buried. Unless they drop enough GP for these to be worth grinding in a large group of players, we're thinking like 10 to 20 mil GP an hour, which is not going to happen, or are in low enough Wildy to teleport out of instantly, no one's going to be killing these. Bosses in multi mean you can't anti-PK the huge clans that show up, and escape is basically impossible. So realistically, you'll need to get there in a group to stand a remote chance. With the way loot drops work, you need to deal the main part of the damage in order to receive the drop, which means pet hunting in groups is extremely slow. The only way pet hunters will be grinding these in multi will be paying boost clans tons of GP to keep them safe and dumpster the bosses rapidly. I personally don't plan on killing these bosses whatsoever in that state until I have enough GP to boost them all. My dream of all pets might just never come to fruition, who knows. The best way to fix these bosses is simply make them Kbd style. Put them in caves in the wilderness, give them unique and fun mechanics, and make it non-wilderness once you get there. They already have a pet attached, which can't be removed at this point. This makes their uniques and pet drops reasonable to grind for PVMers. Jagex clearly wants to inject players into the wilderness, so moving forward, add new, unique wilderness bosses with PvP-centric loot and no pet drops or untradables, ideally PvP related. The loot they drop should be based on how dangerous the area they are located is. Deeper wilderness or multi should equal more loot. Better drop mechanics for the multi-bosses so they can actually be killed by teams who are not necessarily working together. Even the Revenant Maledictus, which has similar fight mechanics to what I'm describing and was added relatively recently, still only drops its actual loot to the person with the most damage. An MVP system like Nex or Nightmare would make a lot more sense for wildy bosses. Ideally, some more bosses like Scorpio, which incentivize bringing anti-PKing weapons to kill the boss itself. Maybe a boss weaker to slower, heavy-hitting weapons like Ballista or Eldermaul would be really good. Ideally, the wildy bosses should encourage risk, and fighting the boss and each other should be heavily rewarding. If you're catching this as it goes up, I will be live. I'm still pushing to get a solid Inferno PB before Raids 3 comes out, and I've started using Thralls, which is the fastest available method for Inferno, but also the most dangerous. So come check it out. And that's it for the video. This is probably going to be one of the more controversial videos I've posted, so if you have a suggestion or idea for the boss rework, please leave it in the comments. I want to see it. Leave a like if you liked it, and or subscribe. Thanks, guys.